basis for this penalty. Mine is not to argue for or against the death penalty, nor to proffer my own views on the subject, and I will not do so. But before I begin, let me congratulate The Voice newspaper and its enterprising team, many of whom are about us, for their welcome initiative in organizing this debate. We live in a rapidly changing world, and it's important that from time to time the public is given the opportunity to express its views on difficult policy matters such as this, and to hear conflicting opinions from experts in an objective way, and not against the background of a current gruesome murder or in the wake of an awful judicial error that may have led to an unjust execution. So I look forward to a rational and fruitful debate on the present justice system in Botswana relating to this subject, in the light of continuing developments and reforms on the African continent and elsewhere in recent years. I was first admitted to practice in Lediretse by the then Chief Justice Dendi Young in February 1969, more than 50 years ago. And I'm still alive. Since then, I've been involved in capital cases as a prosecutor, as defense counsel, as a high court judge, and finally as president of the Court of Appeal. I've also had the task, during a stint as Attorney General, of taking decisions on whether or not to indict for murder and to provide advice to the President on the exercise of his prerogative of mercy. I can say at once that in none of these capacities is involvement in a case where the life of the accused person is at stake a pleasant task. The opposite is the case, and as any judge will confirm, a decision to impose the death penalty usually involves many sleepless hours of self-doubt and re-examination of the evidence. For counsel on both sides, there is the comfort that it's not he, but the court which will decide the case. For the High Court judge, there is the reassurance that the Court of Appeal will choose whether or not to affirm the sentence. And for a Court of Appeal justice, there's no burden to be shouldered alone, because a panel of 3 or more justices must decide each appeal. But despite the safeguards, each one of us, in whatever capacity, bears his or her own share of responsibility for the ultimate outcome, and it's not an experience easily forgotten. But for each of us there is a constant. It is our duty to uphold the constitution of our country, by which we are all bound, and which is designed to maintain the peace and the stability of Botswana. I should say at once that the death penalty is not peculiar to Botswana, nor is it by any reckoning only an historic form of punishment. While many countries have abolished this form of retribution, many others have not, including such great nations as Russia, China, India, the United States of America in some states, and a number of Commonwealth countries in Africa and elsewhere who have chosen not to do so. Botswana so far is one of those. It can safely be said that there is virtually no country on the planet which has not at one stage or other in its history embraced the death penalty. In Botswana, the death penalty has been imposed for the most heinous crimes since time immemorial, long before there were written laws governing our lives. This continued under British hegemony by various legal proclamations, by various legal proclamations, until the penalty and its method of execution, that is by hanging, were entrenched by the Penal Code of 1964, and later, at the time of independence in 1966, by Section 4.1 of the Constitution, which provides, as an exception to the fundamental right to life conferred by that section, for the lawfulness of judicial executions following the sentence of a court pursuant to the law, in this case the Penal Code. By Section 7 of the Constitution, which guarantees protection from inhuman or degrading punishment, existing punishments in existence as of 1966 are preserved as lawful, including in the case of murder and certain other capital felonies, death by hanging. To balance this debate, it must be remembered that the Constitution also condones the killing of enemies in the course of a war. And I think we should remember that wars worldwide have been responsible for thousands more deliberate deaths than will ever result from the judgments of the courts. There have been a number of challenges over the years to the constitutionality of the death penalty and to executions by hanging, in such cases as Ntesang, Kobedi, Kafela II, and more recently Rodney Mosoko. None has succeeded, it being held consistently by the full bench of the Court of Appeal that this penalty and its method of execution are specifically preserved as lawful by the Constitution itself. It is open to Botswana, of course, and this has been so ever since independence, to ourselves abolish the death penalty by amending the Constitution by a popular vote as there provided. Successive parliaments have declined to do so until the present day. Even the most recent constitutional review determined that the majority of those consulted were not in favor of abolition of the death penalty. It is events such as this debate which will determine, or help to determine, how far down the road towards abolition we have come, if indeed that is a road down which we wish to go at all. While the courts have consistently upheld the lawfulness of the death penalty in terms of the Constitution, judges and justices have frequently expressed their disquiet at the extreme and unalterable nature of the penalty once imposed and implemented. In the recent case of Rodney Mosoko versus the state, which is reported in the 2017 Volume 1 BLR at page 531, the full bench of the Court of Appeal chronicled the progressive past decisions of the courts, which have arrived at the present state of our case law, which is that it is only in the most egregious of murder cases, it is only those that attract the ultimate penalty, with extenuating circumstances being widely interpreted in order to achieve this objective. Some examples there given of the type of case which might even today be met by the ultimate penalty are repeat murders by convicts, murders in the course of a robbery or of acts of terrorism, assassinations for reward, sadistic or depraved killings, murders of police officers to avoid arrest, cold-blooded and pre-planned murders, or the murders of innocent and defenseless women or children. But should even these still be resolved by the intentional deprivation by the state of the criminal's life? That is the question which our contestants will debate this evening. Are Botswana yet ready to abolish the death penalty in all cases and once and for all? It is Parliament which must be persuaded to take that step, and it is open and objective debates such as this one which will help to determine when, if ever, that step should be taken. So it is time for the contestants in tonight's debate to enter the lists and to attempt to persuade us of the correct way forward. Arieng Bagaetso, let the debate begin.
Thank you very much for that insightful Kirby. I would now like at this point to welcome to the stage our moderators for the evening, Khosi Moremong and Tumo Moremedi.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. All protocol has been observed. So ours is simple. We are here to moderate this debate, but before the debate starts, we just want to give you a brief background to why we're having this debate today. We, myself, Khosi and Tumo here, we go by the names Chief and Fangs. We have been competitive debaters since our days in university, And after university, we have been training speakers from Botswana to attend international debating tournaments. We've trained a number of Botswana teams to the World Debating Championships. And we partnered with The Voice a couple of years ago to start a debating show, because we realized that our debates only take place in academic settings or with lawyers such as yourselves. So our aim was to take debate out of the academic framework and make it more mainstream, to simply put it, to make debate fashionable. So that's the reason why we started the weekly debate show called The Voice of the People. So we invite you all to tune into the show every Wednesday on The Voice Facebook page, where we have frequent debates such as these. Now, our goal this year is to breed a world champion speaker from Botswana. And the World Championships this year are going to be held in Vietnam. We hope that after this beautiful event, we're going to come knocking on some of your doors to help us get that team to the World Championships. Now, Botswana is the home of debate. Debate has been found in our khutla systems since time immemorial, and it's the place where we allow free speech, and it allows for our leaders to make easier decisions when the opinions of everyone in society has been taken into consideration. This khutla system is so renowned that it has even been trademarked by a company from Germany that teaches leadership and conflict resolution through debate. So they meet in a khutla setup, and leaders have these discussions from this system that we birthed here in Botswana. So we hope for today's debate, we are going to have an engaging debate with all of our panelists. And our aim, again, with today's debate is to just try and make everybody outside of the traditional people who have this debate, who are your lawyers and academics, to be able to get involved in this today's debate. So we have listeners, we have viewers on Facebook. We encourage you to ask questions. We're going to encourage our audience as well to ask questions. We're going to have a Q&A moment. And we would just like you all to be relaxed and have fun and really engage the speakers with all of your wonderful points. So with that being said, I'm going to hand over to Dumo to break down the rules of the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Khosi, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm not going to take too long. I just want everybody to understand how this debate format will work. Each of the speakers, so there will be a proposition and an opposition side. One side that supports the idea that the death penalty, it is time that the death penalty is reviewed in Botswana, and one side that opposes that. Each speaker will be given 7 minutes to give their opening remarks, opening statements, or opening arguments. It will go from the proposition side to opposition, and then proposition, and then opposition, until all four speakers have spoken. Now, at 6 minutes, we will be keeping time. So at 6 minutes, the speakers, and you will all hear a single clap, to let you know that we're at 6 minutes now, and you've got 1 minute to wrap up. At 7 minutes, they will hear a double clap, just that, and that will let you know wrap up, because your time has elapsed. After that, each of the speakers will have 3 minutes to provide a rebuttal to what they have heard. After the rebuttal statements, we will open up the floor to questions from everyone in this room and everybody watching at home through Facebook. After that, we will give 5 minutes to each one of our speakers to provide their closing statements, and then we will conclude the debate. So I'm very excited to hear what arguments we're going to hear from. Oh, yes. My colleague here just reminded me that we have also, in order to encourage engagements, there will be points of information, what we call points of information allowed, which means one of the speakers, if somebody's standing at the podium, one of the speakers on the other side can raise a hand, and if the speaker on the podium chooses to take them, they can ask a brief question, right, responding to what they are hearing. But that is 100% at the discretion of the speaker on the podium. So without any further ado, I would like to step down and let's get this debate started. Thank you.
We would like to invite the first speaker for today's debate, who is going to be in the affirmative and argue why it is time for the use of the death penalty to be ended in Botswana. So I would like to call upon sorry for that, thank you, Thumo, Mosojane to open today's debate. Let's give her a round of applause.
Khosi, thank you very much. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to speak from here. I've just explained my health challenge. I can't stand for long on the podium. Having said that, let me say protocol observed, because we have already lost a lot of time while we were waiting to start. Bom Malebora, I would like to congratulate The Voice, as Kirby has congratulated them, for their innovative leadership and courageous stand, because it takes a lot of courage to initiate something of this magnitude. This panel discussion comes at a critical time of our development, because we find ourselves as a society confronted by unprecedented social challenges for which there is no practical solution. Our society at the moment is experiencing an escalation of murder and murder suicides, ugly ones, scary ones, and you are never too sure whether you'll see the next day the way things are going. And one cannot help thinking that the murder suicides we see now is a way of escape from the hangman. The youthful generation have decided that once they kill you, they deal with themselves so that the hangman will never get them. But do you want to go that route? If they were assured that they would be tried and given a life sentence or whatever, probably there wouldn't be so much murder suicides. I want you to think about it. So this increased violence in our society is driven by anger, drugs, alcoholism, to name but a few. We have become a very angry society, regardless of education, profession. The general Botswana you meet nowadays, all you see is arrogance, anger, frustration. They want to hit back at you as if you have done something. So hence the increase in murder incidents. So who are we, Botswana? I want us to ask ourselves, do we really know who we are? And is capital punishment culture friendly? Especially taking into account that once the murder convict has been executed, nobody knows where they are buried, nobody knows their grave, and it is a serious violation of our culture. You know very well, I was telling Judge Kirby that Botswana have got so many spiritual beliefs that one day your child will be sick and the traditional healer will say, go and visit the uncle's grave or the grandfather's grave and get a bit of soil, the child will be fine. So we are losing something, some cultural values in this whole exercise of hanging people, even burying them. It's like when they are executed, they have not been punished. We must still punish them further by burying them secretly. Nobody will know where they are buried. I just want that to be food for thought. It's one of the things that I've been thinking of. So after 57 years of our independence, do we really believe that capital punishment is a serious deterrent against murder? And my answer is a big no. My first interaction with the hanging of people was when I was a child. I grew up at Gaborone village. My grandfather was a jail guard. So I first heard in my ears about the hanging of people when I was a child. And that day when the hangman had arrived at village, children would stop playing in the streets. We would be so scared. The only noise you would hear is the Catholic priest, Pijo, driving towards prison to go and pray for the men to be executed. So I became scared and I hated. I made up my mind as a child that capital punishment is no good. It is anger-based, it is vindictive, it is tit for tat. It is not punishment, it is just finish and clear. You killed, you are being killed. And I really wonder, my opinion about capital punishment was made up when I was a child. Now this evening we have a question. Is it time for Botswana to review its use of the death penalty? And my answer is yes. Actually, it's long overdue. I was talking about the 60s when I was about in my 11, 12, somewhere there, when I heard about the hangman. One would have thought that after independence, our country ought to have sat down and said, do we still need I'm so far from finishing. Do we still need a carryover of this capital punishment thing? Or at least at 50 years, we could have reviewed. I think it's long overdue for us to say, let us come up with a homegrown product about capital punishment as Botswana, something that is cultural friendly, something that is spiritually okay for us, developed by us, because that other one was developed during the colonial era. It was so exciting when a man called Bicho had killed a white man at Tshepiso and he was hung. The colonialists were hanging a black man who has killed a white woman. This is how I think of it now, that we have carried forward a system that really we cannot support. So I throw away my notes.
That is time.
Okay.
So that is your 7 minutes. Thank you so much, Mosojane. We would like to mention to speakers that we do encourage points of information. So anytime when the speaker is speaking, please feel free to ask points of information. With that being said, we would like to now call upon to the stage the first speaker from the opposing side of today's motion, Dr. Advocate Sidney Pilane. Can we give him a round of applause, please?
7 minutes is too short, sir. Moderators both, the controlling and proprietors of the Voice newspaper, Mr. Justice Kirby. I told him that the judge presidency never ends. Mr. Justice Mosojane, I must recognize my friends, the Chief of Staff, Badi. We've only ever called each other Badi. When he was chairman of the Botswana National Sports Council, I was his vice. And my friend Jacob Nkate, who's special advisor to the president. Senior public officers, and my learned friends. Mosojane. Our answer to the question is no. You might remember that recently the president instituted a commission of inquiry into the review of the Botswana Constitution. Section 4 was not accepted. Botswana were free to express their views in relation to whether they wanted it removed from the Constitution. And as Mr. Justice Kirby has said, the majority of them said no. If that was not review enough, what are we calling for? Who do we want to review it? Who do we want to change it? If we have heard from Botswana and they have spoken to the contrary, there's nothing further to ask and there's nothing further to say. For me, that ought to be the end of the debate. By the way, this is not new, although this format is to some degree new. The Tshwanelo have pretty much every year conducted panel discussions involving a discussion of the death penalty. They've always put me on the good side of the argument. But if the intention of the question was that the death penalty should be abolished, again, you must tell us whether we must now go against the expressed view of the majority of Botswana and do it nonetheless. Does it matter how they feel about it? Does it matter what views they've expressed about it? Should we override those views and their feelings? Or we should pay attention to them? We say we should pay attention to them. That is our first point. Our second point is that, in our country, unlike most countries where the penalty is implemented, particularly countries such as the US, Middle Eastern countries, China, and places like that, the sort of cases in which the death penalty will be imposed are entirely different from the ones in which they will be imposed in this country. I have a few examples here, but we do not have the time for me to go into them. But it is in the sort of matters which, if they were tried in this country, even as there might be convictions on some offense, the death penalty would certainly not be imposed. So the proponents of the abolition of the death penalty invariably invoke examples from extreme countries such as those. Countries who appear to be without boundaries. In Botswana, and I must say this for our judiciary has strained and strained and strayed to avoid imposing the penalty. Because in the same way that there are those who propose its abolition, including Mayor Mosojane, we are all human, we all have feelings. And so when judges consider a matter, when they try a matter, what in a capital offense, they always have at the back of their minds that everything must be done to avoid imposing the penalty if it can be avoided. That is why they only sparingly impose it. That is why since 1966 until 2016, and those are the only statistics I've been able to find, only 50 times has a sentence been executed, averaging about one person a year. There are years, sometimes 1 year, other times 2 years, other times even 3 years, when nobody was executed. And there are years when 2 people have been executed. I think that's happened a few times. In our country, and I have done lots and lots of murder cases, both at trial and on appeal. Even we lawyers strain, even those of us who believe in capital punishment, and I am one of them, we give it our everything. That is why no client of mine at trial has ever been sentenced to death. And that is why in appeals that I have conducted, in respect of matters that I had not done at trial, where the accused had been sentenced to hang, I have done everything I can to ensure that that is altered. And every time I have succeeded. In some cases, the sentence was commuted to a sentence of imprisonment. In other cases, they got off altogether. I think the question to ask in our country is not whether there's anything wrong with the death penalty, because there's nothing wrong with it. Many of us believe in retribution. We are all entitled to have our feelings about it. I think those of us who believe in retribution might so call it vindictiveness, and that's fine. Many of us might feel vindictive about it. I think in quite the same way that they are entitled to feel unhappy about it, the rest of us are entitled to feel vindictive about it. The rest of us are entitled to feel retributive about it. And it is...
Thank you so much for your remarks, Dr. Advocate Pilane. We know 7 minutes is not enough to exhaust it, but unfortunately it's the time we've been given. Yes, we would now like to call upon to the stage to give the second speech from the affirming side, Advocate Rantao. Sorry for that, Attorney Rantao.
Yes. Thank you. Protocol has been observed. I've seen literature, and in the interest of time, I will just try and just summarize what I have. I thought 70 minutes was enough. Now I've realized if Dr. Pilane is also complaining, it's not enough. So we all know, I think it's now we agree that it has been part of our culture since time immemorial. And the colonial government also practiced it. So there are writers that, and I've written, I think Dr. Cecilia Mushininga, I suspected it's you. He's written a dissertation on the history, it's a big dissertation, showing that we've practiced it since time immemorial. It was not borrowed by the Constitution. And Professor Kwame Frumpong and Dr. Elizabeth Masharia Mokobi also confirmed the same thing in the University Law Department. They have articles to that effect. The current statutory framework is common cause, I imagine, so no need to belabor it, only to add a few that many people would not know. Under the BDF Act, there are convictions which, by court martial or high court. Once you are convicted of those offenses, you're also punishable by death. Aiding the enemy, spying, espionage, communication with the enemy. Interestingly, cowardly behavior, bohatlapa. Section 57, cowardly behavior. So, but that doesn't detract from the fact that we all agreed that Botswana and our courts have said that it's constitutional. Now, public opinion. We all agree, I assume, that public opinion, and the writers have said that, public opinion is in favor of the death penalty. Even the Tshiamo has said that with other international organizations. Professor Frimpong, Masharia, Dr. Mushininga confirmed this. And that is why the report of the Presidential Commission of Inquiry isn't surprising on the death penalty. But this is what the report says. The report, with due respect and trepidation, is lacking in material respect, because it says that Botswana overwhelmingly support death penalty because it is a deterrent. I like the fact that it gives a reason. It doesn't say. Botswana said they support the death penalty because of the spirit of vengeance. And of course, Botswana are not vengeful. Of course, Botswana think that it is a deterrent. Of course, public education, and this is what Dr. Masharia says in her article. Public education would point, if public education was prioritized so that Botswana know what a deterrence is, then they would know that there is no evidence whatsoever. There is no iota of evidence, even in the report, that says that can lead to a conclusion that it is an effect, it is a deterrent. None whatsoever, and there are articles all over the world and in Botswana to that effect, saying that there is no evidence that it is a deterrent. So now that is the starting point. If the commission, which they work very hard around the country, and to be honest with you, I think the task that they were given is an onerous task, but they really acquitted themselves very well. Only that I differ with the conclusion. And that is why we have this debate, that we can differ and agree. So, what the commission doesn't do in its report, it doesn't say, it says there were overwhelming views in support of, and there were views against, some views against. And it says that it recommends that the death penalty must be retained. It doesn't explain, it doesn't do an analysis, an intellectual analysis of why. Because remember that the death penalty emanates from section 4, subsection 1 of the Constitution, which the courts have pronounced on. So that provision is not susceptible to amendment by referendum. The Bill of Rights, the provisions of the Bill of Rights are not amended by way of a referendum. These are human rights. These are rights which inhere on human beings, qua human beings. The mere fact that you're a human being, the right to life, the right not to be subjected to inhuman and degrading treatment, the right to dignity, the right not to be discriminated against, the right to equality. In terms of the framers of the Constitution, these rights are not to be subjected to a referendum by the public for purposes of amendment. The public, and I have in mind section 1889 of the Constitution on alteration of pieces of the Constitution. You cannot have people queuing up to decide whether or not there must be the right to life in Botswana. They elect their leaders, which are members of parliament, who have wisdom, who have to listen to debates like this, internationally as well, see what the international trends are, and decide whether on the basis of the evidence, death penalty is a deterrent. It is not about feelings of vengeance, because Botswana, on the report itself, have never said they want it retained because of retribution. They say they want it because it's a deterrence. So that is the starting point. Is it a deterrence? Is it deterrence enough or not? My answer is that it is not. And my learned friend, Senior Counsel Pilane, hasn't demonstrated otherwise. Now, retribution. Botswana have never said they want it because of retribution. The retribution is a factor, but it is a minor factor, and I have in mind it was thoroughly discussed in State versus Makwanyane, a South African Constitutional Court decision of 1995 that abolished the death penalty. It discussed all of these things. Said at the end of the day, it is a balancing exercise. And we know that there is evidence that actually this penalty is imposed more onto the poor, who cannot afford legal representation, who are given pro duo attorneys who are mostly inexperienced and do not have resources. So ultimately, wealthy people, rich people will generally adversely affected because they can afford, they have resources to afford counsel. It is against the poor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your speech. We would like to also just remind the audience members that there are cue cards on your table, just so that you can give us feedback about the event, possibly give us some motions that you'd like to see in future events, and we hope to hear that feedback from you. So without further ado, we'd like to call upon the next speaker from the affirmative side, Mayor Attorney Tshepiso Lediretse.
Good evening, dignitaries present, ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy to see my colleagues from the industry, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media. It's a wonderful occasion for us to be here debating this very sensitive topic. What we need to appreciate and understand in talking about the death penalty is to contextualize it. We should not rush to take situations or instances that are happening in other jurisdictions and take a blanket approach and say that because this is happening in the United States or in Nigeria or in Russia, we are going to equally take what is happening there and apply it here in Botswana. As it were, and as it has been put to you earlier by Dr. Pilane, since independence, we've had 57 executions. That is on average 1 execution per year. My learned friend Rantao says that is no evidence of deterrence. I beg to differ. My stance on that is that our population as Botswana has grown exponentially, if I may, over the years. But the rate of executions has not increased in that time. It would have to equate in number for us to be able to say there is no deterrence. We would see exponential increase in the number of executions in any 1 year, equivalent to our population. What I would also like to put forth, and just for information, is that there is no law that outlaws the death penalty, whether internationally or anywhere. So the death penalty is very much in order. The question would be, if it is unlawful, why is there no proclamation or any specific law that says to us that the death penalty is unlawful and it shall not be carried out? My answer to that is that this is an appreciation that we are a sovereign nation with a constitution for the Republic of Botswana being the people of Botswana. And as Dr. Pilane has put it to us, the people of Botswana, and being the majority, are not opposed to the death penalty, are in support of it. When you talk about retribution and the whole concept that it is inhumane and degrading treatment to take somebody's life intentionally, I think the point of departure for us should be the life of the victims. Those who are proponents of abolition of the death penalty, in my view, seem to over-sensationalize the right to life of the perpetrator. When you do your research, the net is flooded with all sorts of arguments in support of the life of the perpetrator. Somebody who premeditated, had plans, and went and executed that plan. This is on the footing that the death penalty in Botswana is not meted out on every murder. There are categories of murder, but our courts are cognizant that there are extenuating circumstances. We have a lot of people, we have a lot of killings every single year in Botswana, but we do not have executions which are equal in number to the lives that we continue to lose. So our judiciary is doing their work in that regard, noting and appreciating that as human beings, we are not infallible. I hope I've used the English correctly there. We're infallible or we're not infallible. We are prone to error. That is why we have a concept or a legal consideration such as extenuating circumstances. And that is to say that the death penalty is not meted out arbitrarily. There is thought process that goes into that. Accused persons are afforded legal representation, and as is mandated by the various conventions on human rights, the Human Rights Committee, Convention on this and that, we do have those systems or those requirements in place. We talk about brutal, inhumane treatment. And as I say, I would like to emphasize that we have victims of these killings, of these brutal, extreme, cold-blooded killings, appreciating that the death penalty is only meted out in instances of these extreme cases. Can we pay some focus to that? Can we afford them retribution? Can we afford them justice? And in my view, when you say, no, let's replace the death penalty with life imprisonment, and interestingly, as I was doing my research, all the arguments against the death penalty You can take them and flip them, and they're equally applicable on the victim side. When you say the family of the accused persons are going to suffer trauma, who hasn't suffered trauma? What are we doing about those people? When you say, let's afford the accused person who has been sentenced to death, life in prison, why should they see the sun rising while the victim's family have lost family? We talk about the death penalty, children involved in those instances. What about the children of those victims? The only equitable punishment, if I may call it that, to taking a life intentionally, we put it on the same scale, and I would say it's a decision made by the accused person. They waived their right to life. Thank you.
We'd like to thank the speaker for her speech, and then we'd like to call upon Mema Mosojane for the first rebuttal speech, which will be 3 minutes long.
You have not started counting. Now, in recent years, we have seen siblings killing their own. Now, imagine I had 2 children, and one kills the other. Then the state kills the one that's left. It happens. Yes, I have to, because of the 3 minute thing, I just have to throw some points. And then, or the father kills the mother, then the state will kill the other parent. So I feel very, very strongly that Botswana is here to sit down and think about what it wants to do about capital, or about punishing people who kill. I found a lot of comfort in the words that were said by Coretta Scott King, whose husband and mother-in-law have died, the victims of murder and assassination. She says, I quote, "I stand firmly and unequivocally opposed to the death penalty for those convicted of capital offenses. And an evil deed is not redeemed by an evil deed of retaliation. Justice is never advanced in the taking of human life. Morality is never upheld by legalized murder," end of quote. So here is a person who has gone through it all, and she still feels that killing the person who killed Martin Luther King will not bring back her husband or her mother-in-law. So I feel very strongly that we have set ourselves a vision 2036, which says we are going to become a compassionate nation, we are going to become this and that. Shouldn't we be compassionate? Shouldn't we have compassion even to the murder? Okay. And then the reversibility of capital punishment compounds its cruelty. Speaking to the French Chamber of Deputies in 1830, the Marquis Lefebvre said, I quote, "I shall ask for the abolition of the punishment of death penalty until I have the infallibility of human judgment demonstrated to me." There is evidence out there that many people were executed only to find that there was an error in judgment. So what do we do about that? So this is the reason why I'm saying it should be done away with. Unfortunately, we have to jumble through our notes and lose all the sense.
Thank you for your rebuttal speech.
We definitely need to change the lenses through which we look at murder cases. And incidentally, I've been responsible for counseling some people who have lost their loved ones because we have so many gaps in this country. Once somebody is murdered, it's an issue for the newspapers, it's a statistic. We don't have a system that addresses things that the social gaps that are in place. So in Francistown, in the north, I've been taking responsibility to visit this one and that one to talk to them. And they'll tell you that I don't care what the state does with him, it won't bring back my husband, it won't bring back my children. So killing them doesn't help me.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mosojane, for your rebuttal speech. We would like to call the second rebuttal speech from Dr. Advocate Sidney Pilane.
I think when Botswana say they want to be a compassionate nation, they do not intend to be understood to say heartless killers must be saved. They can't seek to extend compassion to people who do not deserve it. Yes, it is vengeance. That is why, remember that most times in this country, it is the deceased is dead. So the question of deterrence doesn't arise. Who do you want to deter? The family of the victim, of the deceased, invariably rise up and want a prosecution. They do so because they want the accused, the perpetrator of the offense, the person who killed their relative, to be punished. For me, that's what retribution is. So you can read articles, and by the way, there is opinion is not agreed on the question whether the death penalty is a deterrent or not. There are lots and lots of articles. One set finds one way, another set finds to the contrary. So these things, intellectuals and articles they write, don't in the end really matter. What matters is how the people think and how they feel. And there can be no doubt that in this country we want anybody who kills in circumstances in which there are no extenuating circumstances, and those are the most extreme circumstances. They must pay for it with their lives. If you talk to Botswana, I have no doubt that that's what they will tell you. They're not interested in articles that are written by intellectuals who usually have a view. Public opinion matters, Rantao. If the public opinion of Botswana doesn't matter, goodness, whose opinion matters? And you talk about members of parliament, they should debate these matters. They do not find it necessary because there's really nothing to debate. The matter is really straightforward. Now I think the question that requires to be addressed is whether all accused persons get proper trials and they get a proper defense. I think some of the time the problem occurs at the trial. The Prodeo Council are sometimes the problem. They do not really represent their clients properly. But I think the answer to that problem is the establishment of a criminal defense fund to ensure that all capital accused receive competent representation. In my view, that's really the question that should be raised, and that is a question that requires to be answered.
Thank you so much for the final rebuttal speech. For the second rebuttal, we would now like to call the second rebuttal from Attorney Rantao.
Thank you. Articles do matter by intellectuals. You take them to school, to university, so that they can educate their people. It's not being arrogant, or they're not seeking to impose. So when intellectuals write to say that there's no evidence that it's a deterrent, and they write volumes and do research in the country, our professors at the University of Botswana and around the world, you cannot then say that it's totally irrelevant. Only public opinion matters. Mr. Pilane knows that that is not correct. Public opinion is one of the factors. I never said that it doesn't matter. It's one of the several factors. And I said that insofar as public opinion is concerned, that is collected by the commission recently, it does not point, it simply says deterrent. The argument that they want retribution comes from my learned friends, doesn't come from the people. The people say that it is a deterrent. The question is whether or not the people are whether or not that sentiment by the public is correct. The answer is that it is not correct. And the professors have demonstrated over the years that it is not correct. That is why my learned friends cannot point to one single article from a Botswana, unlike me who has at least 3, that says that it does not serve any purpose as a deterrent. So educate the people. International treaties. There's many international treaties that point to that support abolition. I can give an example of the 1966, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, 1966 and its second optional protocol, aiming at the abolition of the death penalty, and the Africa Charter on Human and People's Rights. So yes, that is not. They're not self-executing. They are not the law in Botswana because Parliament has not made them the law in Botswana. Justice Kirby has said a lot of this stuff in his judgments over the years, that if we do not codify them by making them law, they are not the law. But they are our international obligations. So it is not correct with respect, Ms. Lediretse, that to suggest that even international documents do not support abolition. They do, and they do so directly. The time I think is now gone. I just wanted to. Retribution is one, this is what the court said. Retribution is one of the objects of punishment, but it carries less weight than deterrence. The righteous anger of family and friends of murder victim, reinforced by the public abhorrence of vile crimes, is easily translated into a call for vengeance. But capital punishment is not the only way that society has of expressing moral outrage at the crime that has been committed. We have long outgrown the literal application of the biblical injunction, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Punishment.
Thank you so much, Attorney Rantao, for your final rebuttal speech. And now we will hear the final rebuttal speech to close off the first half of this debate from Attorney Lediretse.
All right, I would like to give us something to think about by way of a quote by Sadhguru. This is against the argument that we do not give life, we're not creators. When you eat a banana, you don't become a banana. The banana becomes a person. It translates into a human being. That is to say that, yes, we do give life. And that is how the Constitution or the state's duty is to guarantee protection of that life. By having the death penalty in place, we are sure that everybody sitting everywhere can be certain and know that if I go out and I kill anybody in cold blood, I can best be assured that I'm going to be taken out as well. And I'm not here to sound correct. There's no shortage of human beings on this planet. We are enough and we continue to increase in number. When you have a plague, and if I may go as far as saying that, we want to take that plague out. We want to remove you from society because there's no guarantee that you're not going to repeat that same offense, and we do have instances where that offense is taken. And that speaks to the point that it's not every killer that is executed. We are clear and systematic in implementing the death penalty. What interests me as well is that those that are abolitionists will say, no death penalty, but if you are going to do it, please do it like this. That says to me, you're okay with it. You should in fact just stop at no death penalty, finished. You want to error in judgment. We do talk about that. We don't have those cases in Botswana. I'm bringing us back to context. Let's talk about Botswana and not other jurisdictions. Victims don't want killings. There's no research to that effect in Botswana. I'll take us back to that. They like to say that those that are for the death penalty were very emotional. It is an emotional punishment. I throw it back to them. They're being very emotional about it. There's no logic. If you're a cold-blooded killer, it follows. You must face the same fate. We must take your life and we must place it on the same balance. Lady Justice has a scale on one hand, and she has a sword on the other hand, and she should not be afraid to use that sword. We over-sensationalize the right to life of a killer. As I did say, we are big about it, the right life of a killer. What about the one who's dead and the family of those that are dead? They say death row is hell. That's the point. That is exactly where we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Lediretse. And the name of this show, it's called The Voice of the People. So before we brought this motion out for our experts to debate, we sent our team out from The Voice onto the streets to hear what the people have to say about this. So I think this may support Pilane's arguments about what the people have to say. So I invite you to just listen and hear what the people had to say about this motion. Thank you.
If you put it this way, that the death penalty encourages mob justice. The law enforcement entity is always looking for perpetrators, mob justice. So what does that actually say? It's like a monkey see, monkey do situation. Because now as a civilian, I think if my leaders are killing people to set the record straight, or maybe right or wrong to say, then maybe if somebody was to snatch a purse here, if we got a hold of that person, we do what they did.
Batho ba hedile go bolwa ka bodipahela motho a itse gore ke a torong ko nyala ke a go ja stampa ha ke tswa ha ke tla ke none kgantele be go te motho ga a bonwa molato ga a bona molato a ntse a bolaile motho ka gore
a ka re bo bolele motho ka le re bela dipela go betsa go bolele motho a be go 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 tlomisho a be puso bana gore nyame go no bolaileng gone o se go bo bolaiwa se ka se mo go te 5 years o bolaiwa hela o tshisiwa go tswa le mona wa bolang ba senyetsang ba dutla motho a boletse mo ntweng ya motho a ntshwa yeah, you give 50-50, Marane.
All right, I'd like to thank all 4 speakers for some very, very interesting arguments. And now we're going to open up for questions from the audience. This mic will move around. So if you have a question, please just raise your hand and we'll move the mic to you so that you can ask your question. But before I take one of your questions, I have one question for one of the panelists here, myself, just to open things up. You see, The Voice, we covered the court case, Lediretse Tshepiso versus the state, and the Court of Appeals. So my question is directed at Advocate Dr. Pilane, which is, you made the argument that the people do not support the abolition of the death penalty. However, the Court of Appeals argued, or they ruled against the people's will in that Lediretse Tshepiso versus the state, specifically because they felt that that law trampled on the rights of people, and that this should therefore not be taken to the people to decide to trample on the rights of a minority. So my question then becomes, why should, when we're talking about a right that gives birth to all rights, why should that right be up to people's opinions?
Anybody, please raise your hand so I can come and bring the mic while he's answering. Yes, take it.
You can go ahead and answer, Law.
Oh, yes. If you were present when I argued the Mosojane case on behalf of the Attorney General, you will remember that I made two main arguments. My first argument was that several years before, the same Court of Appeal, a full bench of the same Court of Appeal, had found against the sort of ask that Mosojane and his ilk were making. And that, in my respectful view, nothing had changed really to affect that decision. My second point, and it is for me an important point of principle, is that it is not the place of the courts, and I say this with great respect, to review and alter the law. That is the province of Parliament. And I think that the three organs of government must respect one another sufficiently and must be sufficiently humble to accept that certain functions do not belong in their area and they belong elsewhere, they belong to another organ. And one of the contentions that I offered to the Court of Appeal in that matter was that it's okay for you to feel that it is time to strike down those provisions of the penal code because you consider them to be offensive. But in my respectful view, it is not your place. You have the right in your judgment to make a strong recommendation to Parliament to give consideration to making the change that you think ought to be made. And that I haven't argued only in that case. I have argued that in every case that I have had the privilege to argue. Because if we encourage our courts to become so active as to become legislators, goodness knows where we will end. And I'm a very strong proponent of separation of powers. So similarly, when I must choose between Mr. Rantao's intellectuals, and I am an intellectual, and the opinion of Botswana, I will choose the opinion of Botswana. That's what I did in the Mosojane case, as you say. That's what I do in the death penalty matter. I don't care about the intellectualism. It's not about that. It is about what the people want, what suits the people. I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you very much, Advocate Dr. Pilane. And we have a question over there. Please introduce yourself first and then posit your question. And please let us know who your question is directed towards.
Good evening. My name is Tjedu from Human Associates. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Makwati Edwin from Mosojane Associates. I am also an academic and I suppose an intellectual. So I think my opinion will matter. Let me thank the Voice for organizing this very important debate today. But my first question, I think I've got several. I don't know how much time you can allow me. I've got a lot of them. My first question or concern is directed towards Advocate Pilane, who said the opinions of the people matter. And I think he has dwelt much on that point. And I agree with him, because this country belongs to the people, and the people should govern. But it seems that selective opinion of the people matters from your perspective, because with this ill-fated commission on the constitutional reform, there was overwhelming evidence that Botswana wants direct election of the president, but that was said to not matter. But now it matters with the death penalty. I think that is a bit, I would call it hypocritical. But at the same time, I must say that I agree with you that the death penalty is a deterrent Attorney Rantao, it is a deterrent. According to me, there are many people that I believe some of us would have wanted to kill, but we haven't because, because of the death penalty. And also, if you check, yeah, I do agree. I think there are a lot of people who have wanted to kill, but you haven't killed them. Let me move from that now. Yes, sir. Let's talk about our system. I don't think the death penalty is a problem per se, but we have a very flawed system where, for example, coerced evidence is very rampant in this country. Anybody here probably knows that there's a lot of torture happening in the torture chambers of the Botswana Police Service and other law enforcement agencies. I'm here talking so that those who are in government will try, by all means, to go and find out, and maybe commission research also, to find how torture is so rampant within our law enforcement. Because our investigators can't investigate. And I say this from a point of view of knowledge because I've worked in places where I investigate such misdemeanors and such egregious offenses, where torture and other forms of ill treatment are so rampant that people end up incriminating themselves or making admissions. And yet our jurisprudence is not so clear on torture-based evidence, where people have been forced to give certain evidence against themselves. So I want you, Dr. Pilane, also to answer to that. Finally, I think you all know the scourge of COVID that just passed. A lot of people died because there was no medication in hospitals. There were no enough doctors in the hospitals. And the corruption that was so rampant led to so many people dying. Ladies and gentlemen, there are so many potholes in Botswana that some of my friends have died because they're trying to avoid potholes. And I would be very happy to see the death penalty also being applied to the corrupt officials in government offices. I don't think murderers matter that much. We've got serious issues to deal with, and corruption is one of them, and it's a crime against humanity. And if corruption is a crime against humanity, that I believe it should be, then we should extend it to the corrupt officials. So in a nutshell, what I'm saying is the death penalty itself is not bad, but it's the way, the motives, and the reasons why we do it. And it's now being used by politicians simply to say to those that are fearful to say we are doing something about crime when they are not doing anything. Let's be honest to ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I want us to take a couple more questions before we invite the other speakers to come up. But could I please just remind everyone to try to keep your questions or statements brief so we can get in as many as possible. Our time is limited. Meantime, there's a comment that came in from Facebook from some of our live viewers. And this one, I imagine, is, yes, this is from Bonatso Pottering Takadu Mbatera, who said that you're right, sir, only us the poor will be taken to death. So I would like to posit this actually directly, rephrase it a little bit to Mr. Rantao, because we heard Advocate Pilane say that, well, this is not the issue of poor people being represented by inexperienced lawyers. That's not a principal matter. You can just establish a fund to deal with this. So is this really an important issue, or should the focus not really be on establishing principled answers to this? You said there's a question there?
Yes, there's a question. Dumelang bagaetsho ke leboga the panelists, my friend Sidney, Lediretse, Mosojane, Rantao. Ki bua ke le Jacob Nkata, mi ki bua ke le motho hela, ha ki bua ka office of the president. Let's go and collect. Well, I don't understand what you just said. Ka statement sa gore gonne le a fund e ka thusang ba sa kgoneng go bona di agente tse di bokgoni as opposed to the current system e leng gore anybody can be picked gongwe a sena bokgoni jo ka gore gongwe o ke sa khopise ope ga ana tiro ka gore o kotase ra utana jano se repila nna ke ne ke mutwa se bua ke gore ha gona le fund you can take the best to come and represent this person. Akere. No,
thank you very much. How's that?
Yeah, okay. The other thing is, ha 80% ya Botswana iri bone ba bata capital punishment go go parliament e pass molao. Otherwise wa ga manjano wa di professors tsa la tsela di buantse ha ke tlhaloga di professors tseo ba togele ba kwale ko ba kwalang teng rona re bata gore ma parliament a rona ba dire se rona re se ba romang a ke re wa nkutlwa raitso sa bohelo gate la re ga gona deterrent mo punishmenting ha ile gore punishment ga se deterrent, why do you have punishment in other offenses? Ke le sa abolish punishment altogether la re wa batho hela gore ba commit offenses. Why do you have people going to prison for robbery, for theft? Because you presume gore ha ke tsamaya na ke le Jacob nkate mo strategy ke be ke bona monna yo wa leta go ka re e dule hante ke tshwantse ke akanya gore me kana hanka tshwarwa sengwe stand tirahal. Punishment is a deterrent, period. The harsher the punishment, the more deterrent it is. Togalang go tsameka ka dio tse ya ga tsameka jano mongo kana ko ena tsalame o no bua gore gompieno yana kana ke nna ke halare something to do with deterrent. Nya ona bua ka election of president are rana re bua se ha tse ditang ra di thokomologa ha gona opo thokomileng o thokomologileng as regards the commission, the issue ya election of president. The report is still to be addressed. So who says it has been disregarded? By who? Where? How? When?
Thank you very much.
Yame is to do with the issue which was raised by Reko Morago from Modimo Associates. If you don't have proper legal representation, you might end up being the one who is to die, while those with proper legal representation might just walk away. And I think that unless that issue is corrected and the level field, playing field is made equal, and even the investigations, like what he said, the prosecutors and investigators can be brought up to the level where they know exactly how to investigate and not to resort to coercion, then maybe the death penalty can be, we can understand it. Because, for example, take the issue of the case of Gwara Motswetla, where those two men, they escaped death by a few hours. Had not Ditshwanolo stepped in and Kafela, they would have gone to the gallows. And yet the process of it all was flawed. And that's why they were eventually escaped death.
I'd like Lediretse, if you don't mind responding to that when the responses come. Yeah.
Okay. My name is Kabelo Nkwani. And the first question perhaps I'll pose to Judge Ian Kirby, who in his deliberations made a statement that through prerogative of mercy, the president may grant a convict a pardon. And that pardon may be either be free or subject to other conditions. At what stage can the convict apply for a pardon in a case of murder for a presidential pardon? Since Section 53 of the Constitution, subsection A, says that the president may grant a pardon. And the second one, perhaps, Mosojane, since she comes from an area that is vested with people who are obsessed with ritual murders. And how do you think if in an event that death penalty is abolished, don't you think that situation will emulsify and perhaps be so unproportional to a point where we can't take our children to school? In that event, what do you think? How are you going to defend such perpetrators? And the last issue, Attorney Rantao. We had incidences in the past, and around the 90s until 2016, is it 2016? There was a series of serial killers. Perhaps the more they get coverage from the media is the more they continue to kill and enjoy the limelight. In that case, and where they will gravitate towards your house, how are you going to deal with such? As a father who has raised your kid and invested a lot and have a vision for your daughter, and in an event that death penalty is abolished, are you going to live with that? And in that dispensation, how are you going to address the issue? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to take the final question.
Yeah, I think we've got final two hands.
Okay.
Final two hands. Then, yeah.
Okay, final two questions, yes.
Thank you so much. Betsu, Jaka Renkatelena, just because it's a office of the president, please. So it seems to me that yes, there is the jury is still out in terms of whether or not this is a deterrent. Although I think we know better, crude as it may be, in terms of how you measure deterrence. Now, the question that I always ask myself, and I'm glad that the specific question was that, is it time to for Botswana to review the death penalty? In other words, it's contextualized to our nation. And we always seem to be quoting examples from outside as opposed to our situation. The question is it broken? I think this is the question that we have to ask ourselves. Is it broken? Has it served us well, or is it leading us down a slippery slope? I think for me, this is the question that we should be asking. So the question is, again, have you ever imagined how things would be if we were to abolish the death penalty? I think these are the areas that we should now be looking at. This, for me, this is how I think we should be looking at it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. And then final question from the gentleman in the back.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mr. Diporiso. I teach political science with the University of Botswana. I thought that the question here is that, is it reasonable, is it time whether Botswana should change the way they viewed the death penalty? And I thought in answering the question, we should look at the context within which the death penalty is being practiced. And the context here is democracy. And when we look at democracy, generally, the first issue about it is that the general will of the people has to prevail. I know that we may be having intellectuals that are having variant views about whether or not it is proper, whether or not it is righteous, good, evil, blah, blah, about whether or not Botswana perceive it to be correct. But I think the first issue to address is whether or not it is popularly accepted in the country by the people and whether it serves them right. And I think that is the context. Because in democracies, you don't value the number of reasons that are given. You simply look at the reasons. You simply look at the number of the reasons themselves. You don't look for the value, whether or not it is rational, etc. So I think I agree with my Lediretse that we probably should look at the context, that whether or not it is popularly accepted in the country, and Dr. Pilane's view, whether or not the citizens of the country accept popularly, whether or not the law is legitimate, and the legitimacy of the law can only be tested by whether or not the people themselves accept it the way it is. In terms of what Rantao was saying, I think we might dig into quite a number of literature that was written by philosophers, right from Montesquieu and the others, Bo Rawls and the others, who talk about the inviolability of rights. But there is a serious burden to democracies that is emerging, the contraband of rights that is going to dilute the popularity of the people's views in democracies. I think that is where the question is, basically. If the people want the death penalty to be abolished, it is them that will direct that it should be abolished. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tshepiso.
For those... Can we excuse one last question? It's the very last one.
All right, all right.
Begging me this time.
Yes.
Thanks, Chief. Mipi, I am a professional assistant to Mr. Rantao. Mr. Pilane, this question is for you, but don't worry, there will not be any bias. I am a personal admirer of you, but this question is directed to you as well. You've mentioned that the problem that was explained by Mr. Rantao relating to access to justice and proper legal representation can be easily sorted out by funding. My question is, how many people are we going to kill until the time we're going to be able to establish that fund? It is in the context and background of our idea of trying to utilize and implement socio-economic rights, which are clearly a non-justiciable set of rights in this country. So the access to justice is one of those. The poor people are being subjected to the death penalty because they don't have access to justice. Now the simple answer is, when? When will we be able to provide that fund? How long will it take? And we've spoken of statistics, how Botswana have voted. I accept the report, the Commission has done well, but it does not necessarily give us a clear-cut statistic as to what the majority is and what the minority is. So please perhaps try and address that, and let's take a way forward.
All right, thank you very much, Mipi. Mipi is one of the debaters that has been through our debate program, so we're very proud to hear you making such brilliant points, all right? Yes, all right, so in the interest of time, I would like to maybe suggest that all the speakers, perhaps we will extend, we were supposed to schedule 5 minutes for your closing statements, we'll extend it to 7 minutes each, and then you can respond to the questions within your closing statements, I think, just so that we don't keep people too late on a work night. I just wanted to direct one quick question at Mosojane, which is the idea that, okay, fair enough, even if we were to buy this idea that the death penalty is not an actual deterrence to murder, right? You already made the point that there's an epidemic of violence caused by anger and drugs and other factors. So what I haven't heard is what alternative do you think needs to be instituted in society? Because while you may argue that the death penalty is inhumane, but what happens to these people that have committed murder, premeditated murder? Do they just go into prison? Should we not worry about the concern, the safety of the guards, the other prisoners, and everyone else if they're there? What suggestions do you have to tackle this epidemic of violence that our society is dealing with? So I'd like to just call you all up. I suppose maybe let's start off with Advocate Pilane, and then we'll go on to Mr. Rantao, and then Lediretse, and then finally Mosojane to conclude the debate. Thank you very much.
How many people are we going to kill before we recognize the need for the creation of a criminal defense fund. Well, I have no answer for that question because it's not my place to create any fund. But I think if you guys are going to raise questions for debate, those are the questions that you should raise, so that we debate those subjects. Those are the matters that we should debate. It may be that in the course of debate, including at the conclusion of the debate, we'll find answers to that question, and we'll set about ensuring that such a fund is created. Now all I was saying is, let's deal with the right question. And the one that has been raised today is not the right question. Mr. Rantao has said the overwhelming majority of Botswana support the death penalty because they say it is a deterrent. So who can speak better than them? 3 intellectuals? And finally, this matter of human rights. Whose human rights, and I think Maitu has very eloquently made that point. Whose human rights are we talking about? The human rights of the killer? What about the human rights of the killed? What about the human rights of the family of the killed? This human rights thing, where does it come from? Who tells us what's human rights and what's not? We as a people have values. We've always had values. Nobody can teach us anything about values. So please, yes, I see that a lot of them bring it under the rubric of human rights. They forget the human rights that really matter. Those who decide, as Maitsu has said, to give up their right to life have no human rights that must be protected. It is everybody else who's got rights, human rights that must be protected. Nahel, I think we've discussed this matter. As for potholes and COVID and corruption and things like that, again, that's a matter for Parliament. If you think that corruption should be made a capital offense, I think you will need to make an approach to Parliament. Nahela, there's nothing I can do about it.
I'd like to thank the Speaker for his speech, and can we please have Mr. Rantao, thank you, for your rebuttal and closing remarks.
Yes, thank you. Looks like I have several questions to answer. You see, I think there's one mistake that my learned friends on the other side and some who have asked questions make. We all agree that what the public sentiment is about the death penalty, that's common cause. Majority overwhelming, that's fine. But the reason we do not debate because we are trying to answer the question, what do the numbers say? It's not a game of numbers. It's a question of whether death penalty is an appropriate sentence. This penalty is meted out by the courts. It is not meted out by the public by voting. The courts, when they mete out any punishment, they consider factors. So we are debating whether the factors are such that we should revisit death penalty. Not whether many of you in this room, and obviously I know you support the death penalty, because you are a microcosm of society. So I think we are losing it when we keep on emphasizing public views when we all know what the public view is. Because otherwise we would come here and say, let's vote, no debate, and we stop there. That is not the point. That is not why we are here. That is not what Botswana want to hear. Botswana want to hear reasons for the death penalty and reasons against the death penalty in this debate. If we just came here to tell Botswana, you overwhelmingly, before the commission supported it, case closed, I will not be debating. And again, we should also understand that, and that was in the context of the Mositi Mang judgment, which Advocate Pilane was asked about, and the so-called Rabibo matter where him and I argued. And it was made very clear the courts agreed with us, and Justice Kirby here, that the law should also protect the minority. The law is not about protecting the majority. Majority, you can have a majority view, but it's not always about that. It is always, and we do not live in our own cocoon as a country. We can't say it's all about what Botswana want. But Botswana goes out, signs international treaties. Those matter. You cannot go out and sign international treaties through government, our executive, the executive arm of government. They sign them, then they come back here, and we say, but they don't matter because it's about what we want. It's about, human rights are universal. Human rights are not Botswana-like. We do not have our own human rights that have got nothing to do with the world. The right to life is a universal right. It is not a local right. It's not a Moshopa right or a Ramotswa right or a Gaborone right or Mokolodi right. So and I've said, the opinion of the people certainly matters. We never said it doesn't matter. It's a factor to be considered. And let's not argue as if it is the only factor. The moment the people say, we want it, that's democracy. As my friend Tshepiso says, and it ends there. That is not like that in the field of human rights, which are universal. Deterrence worked in it. You have individual deterrence, you have general deterrence. Those are the sub-principles of deterrence. Does it deter an individual? Number one. Is there evidence to that effect? Does it deter the general? Does it provide general deterrence? Those are the principles that we all have to consider. We can't say those are things of intellectuals. But we are intellectuals, all of us here. We can't come all of us here, but are listening to our how we debate, and then we say, but what we are saying has got nothing to do with Botswana. We are the very people that they took us to school so that we advise them, what are these human rights things? What are these things? Otherwise, we should throw away our constitution. Because the framers of our constitution have provided a Bill of Rights. These are human rights. We cannot say, your human rights, these things of so-called human rights activists. But sections, the whole chapter 2 of the constitution, that was not made yesterday. That we had since 1966. Way before I was born. Probably only Mosojane and Justice Kirby and Justice Mosojane. We cannot say that. We cannot. Yeah, Resident was probably 4. So we cannot say that we've got nothing to do with those rights, which are in our own constitution, because those are things for intellectuals. That is, with due respect and trepidation, not helping the public. The public has to be told, you have human rights in your constitution. That is what they are interested in. They are not interested in the mere fact, which is common, which they all know, that they support the death penalty overwhelmingly. By so just telling them, you support it, let's retain it, we are not helping them. Because we are just telling them what's so obvious. So if 80% say that and there's a question of irreversible penalty, that it's irreparable, irremediable, and irreversible. It is unlike any other punishment. It is unlike imprisonment, where mistakes occur, where there is a Purdue counsel, a Purdue attorney, we all accept that they are inept, that many of them are not resourced, that many of them are not skilled enough, because they are Purdue counsel, they are paid low fees. That is what the researchers have found out. Now, the answer cannot be set up a fund. How about now? What happens now when poor people, and these are the poor people who actually, in my view, actually like the death penalty. But we are trying to protect them. We are not trying to protect us intellectuals who can afford legal fees. We have to tell them, it's you, in the ghettos, in the casas, in the rural areas, who get hanged. Wealthy people who sit here, these intellectuals, have more money. They can afford your Mr. Chilisas to represent them, They have a lot of money for these people. But these are the people who we are saying, at some point in time, political leadership should create a fund so that able lawyers can assist them. How about now? It means we all agree that there is a problem, that death penalty is arbitrary. It's arbitrary in the sense that it's disproportionate against the poor. No, we cannot, it's a question of numbers. The 80% say they want it. Amongst them are those poor people. Thank you.
Thank the Speaker for his speech, and I'd like to invite Member Lediretse to give her rebuttal and closing remarks. Thank you.
Council, you never disappoint. Quite passionate there. Impressive. There was a question which was put to me by my lady here from The Voice, talking about the case where Ditshwanelo was involved, and then Bokhafela came in and so on, and the accused escaped the noose by a few hours or something. My answer to that is it didn't happen. Finish. That's the end of that story. We do not have cases in Botswana where it has been said that we have committed a mistake. That person shouldn't have gone. I think as Botswana, where we have convictions and sentences of the death penalty, Botswana, no. That person killed that person in cold blood, because these trials are held in public, we are all privy to it, and we all have opinion about it. So we are very much aware, Hori. It was done in cold blood, and the death penalty is opposite in that instance. We talk about legal fees, my friend Tshiamo, as if legal fees somehow exonerate you. When you get to court because you have money, now you're going to be exonerated. You have bigger and better rights than anybody. We are all afforded equal protection by the law. We are all equal before the law. I'm talking about what the law says, not my opinion or anybody else's, but let's not lose sight of that. When you have killed in cold blood, it will reveal itself and the appropriate penalty will be implemented. Let's not look at the Constitution selectively. Let's not talk about the Constitution affords the right to life. The Constitution also gives exceptions. It also says that that life will be taken away in this instance. As I did say, let's be holistic in our discussions and in our approach. Let's not be selective. Let's not over-sensationalize as abolitionists tend to do. Now, in closing, and because this is a debate and there's no ruling or judgment which is going to come from this, in preparing for this debate, and as I say, I think what makes one a good debater is to sometimes make concessions. The question is it time to review? I did a whole lot of research. I spent weeks coming up with arguments why we should retain the death penalty. But this morning I said, no, wait, let me look at this question as a legal professional and look at it. It says, is it time to review? But we're all on a tangent talking about abolition. The question is it time to review? And as I said, without fear of losing any case here, I think we do need to seriously ask ourselves that question as Botswana. When have we done a serious review? A review means you look into the processes, we self-introspect, openly and publicly or through whatever processes, and we look at the mechanisms and whatever other points, whatever other pieces of the puzzle that are there which eventually lead to the death penalty. That is the question. Is it time for us to sit and reflect? A review does not necessarily mean that we are going to abolish. A review means we are self-introspecting and we reaffirm our position. If you ask me, I think our government owes us that as Botswana, because even doing the research, it was painstaking because there is no information supporting the death penalty, yet we continue to implement it. We call on our leaders to say, let's bring it to the public. There are recommendations that we have acceded to as a state before the ICCPR, those complicated governance committees that we attend and report to at certain intervals. We have said we will hold public debates as a state. Where are we with that? And as I say, what makes a good debater is to make concessions. Ke tla bua le re Pilane re tswa hao. Buy him a drink. So if you ask me, I think we've all been on a tangent for the past 2 hours. The question is it time to review? If you ask me, and having gone to various government institutions looking for information, where I was turned away as a member of the public and told, no, you must write, there's a whole lot of red tape, you can't do that, we must audit what we tell you. The information must be publicly available and ready, and we must understand and we must be informed. Not where we are reading covenants and articles from intellectuals, whether from abroad or from here, but to be informed on the context fully so and factually so. In closing, the death penalty is lawful, we are here, and we will continue to implement it as we do. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the speaker for her speech and invite Member Mosojane to provide her closing statement and answer the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I can said I should sum up everything, including answering that question. Let me just give a little bit of background of where I'm coming from. I think you may agree with me that for us senior citizens, Kirby, Mosojane, I don't see any other. We are a generation that has lived in relative peace prior to independence. There wasn't as much policing as we have now. There was almost no crime at all. People had pure hearts. And over the years, as Botswana developed, we have seen ourselves moving into a transition or into some crossroads. And it is at the crossroads is the most frustrating place to be because you don't know whether to go to the left or to the right. I feel Botswana is a nation that is at the crossroads. And because I had this burden when I was at the Kota, I used to volunteer to go into schools in Francistown, around Francistown. More than 20 schools I've visited to run workshops to empower youth on decision making. And I was able to interact with a lot of young people. After the workshop, about 10 young people would say, Mothers, we just want to see you one-on-one. And those that I saw one-on-one told me that they want to kill somebody, their grandmother, because she's selling the food that the social welfare officers are giving him. She wants to kill the mother. She comes home late, drunk. She wants to kill so-and-so. She wants to kill Malume. So I was just amazed. These young people want to kill. So this is where I'm coming from. I'm coming from a background that we are a nation at the crossroads. And the time to wake up is now and assess the social needs of our nation and find out what is the cause of the anger that is even in the hearts of young people who as teenagers have killed another teenager over a plate of rice, over a can of Coke. So all these things have really broken my heart about the future generation, my grandchildren. What kind of Botswana are they going to live in? And then there are drugs. There is abuse of alcohol. There are all sorts of things happening to make young people angry and want to kill. Although they know that if they kill, they may be killed. So that's why we are arguing that it is not, capital punishment is not a deterrent. A deterrent means, does it scare people? Does it make people not to want to kill? Because we see murder incidents are on the rise. Almost every week, somebody has been killed or two people were killed at a drinking place, wherever, for whatever reasons. So in the end, we are going to execute half the population. But we do need some measures to address these inadequacies. We are a nation crying for help, where we are right now. I'm saying so because we have seen, let me say, 3 generations. They are 30 years old, 60, and then there are some of us who are over 70. So what's going to happen during the next generation if we don't address, if we don't take the diamonds money and build institutions and develop a response to the anger in our nation so that there'll be less people executed for murder? When are we going to develop in our education system, from kindergarten to tertiary, anger management, emotional management, identity, who are you? Whether you have a father or you don't have no father, whether you are poor or rich, because these problems are cross-cutting. They are happening to rich people, to poor people. So we desperately need, Botswana is crying for help. Botswana is a nation that needs rebirth. I'm not an intellectual, I'm not whatever you have been saying you are, but I have lived in the community, worked in the community, counseled people who are in pain. I have touched bleeding wounds. So Botswana, our beautiful nation, needs us to rise. What do you do as a teacher when you realize that your young student is in drugs? Who do you call? Where is your next point of stop? Where do you stop and say, I need help? We don't have all those responses. So even if we leave capital punishment in place, but we definitely need a response. Our ancestors taught us how to respond to life, how to love yourself, how to love the other person, how to build the inner person, whether you are educated or not, whether you are rich or poor. We lack that. We don't have anything to close the gap that educate people to respond to life, to the force of life. Life is a force that needs a response, a positive response through self-development and developing other people, respecting self and respecting other people. What we see nowadays, we see external forces influencing people or making people to feel that they are important. So, your question, right, so you said I'm from a region, and ritual murder. I beg to differ. All over Botswana, I don't think there has been any ritual murder in the Northeast in the past 10 years. So I want you to apologize. Anyway, I said we're a society that needs healing. My closing remark, Botswana needs healing. Ritual murder has been there when I was a child. It will always be there, but I've not seen one person being executed for ritual murder in recent years. So maybe they had a lot of money to employ a big lawyer. God knows why it has not gone that route. The American Civil Liberties Union says, a society that respects life does not deliberately kill human beings. That's my closing remark.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much to all 4 speakers. I have not had such a good time in a very long time. Before we wrap up, I just want to invite one of those intellectuals that's been much discussed tonight, a legal historian from the University of Botswana. She was very keen to come and speak to us and give us a little bit of a context on on the history of Botswana and the death penalty. So just very quickly, could you please give a kind round of applause to Dr. Cecilia Mushiniga from the University of Botswana.
A very good evening and all protocol observed. I don't know how I can wrap up so much research within a very few minutes, but I'm going to try my level best. And having gone through a lot of cases, we should admit that our legal system in Botswana is doing a very great job in trying to make sure that very few people go to the gallows. That's a fact. And as they say, history will judge you. And my job is to review what they've done and analyze it. And look at the inconsistencies, the consistencies, and what has come out of it. So if we look back, we can trace the death penalty among the Botswana from as early as 1835. And in that time, what was happening? A person could be executed for mere crimes such as revealing secrets of boys' initiation. Those are crimes that a person could be executed for. 1883, we look in Molopulule, people were executed for crimes such as witchcraft. Then we move on into the colonial era, and Botswana was one of those few countries where we never had a situation of politicization of the death penalty. And that means that the death penalty now means something else, totally different from what it means to the people in Zimbabwe, the people in South Africa, where the death penalty was politicized. So as a result, that explains why the public opinion tends to favor it. Because as far as they're concerned, it's for the justice of the victim. But times have changed. And it's time for us to really think, are we still moving with the old system, like what the question is asking? But that's not what I'm going to answer today. I'm just going to basically state facts. So there are a few issues that we need to think about. One is aspects of free and fair trials. Are our people able to get the legal representation that they want? We have to be honest. If you have a good lawyer, you can get away with murder for intoxication. And our cases show that. But there is inconsistent extenuating circumstances. You see in one case, an extenuating circumstance such as intoxication, as I've said, is accepted. In another case, it's not accepted. So these inconsistencies are what us historians are looking into and saying, as a country, we need to have a way of having consistency in which extenuating circumstances are accepted and which ones are not. In Botswana of late, very few cases whereby a victim of passion killing will have their perpetrator sent to the gallows. In earlier years, yes, but of late, passion killing, they are no longer getting the death penalty. So you see, the legal system is trying by all means to make sure that very few people go to the gallows. But the issue here is the inconsistency. How can we review our laws to make sure there is consistency in which extenuating circumstance is accepted? Because this is set on the prerogative of existing judge to decide if they should accept extenuating circumstances or they should not. And this is a matter of concern. Then indeed, as historians, we do accept. So far, there has not been any error that has been documented. Near errors, yes. But errors that have been accredited to and accepted as errors, no. So that shows that our justice system is trying by all means to make sure that very few people go to the gallows. Then I'm going to also, talk about the ritual matters which Ma addressed. And we also see what I've been talking about, that the death penalty has taken different forms and changes. You will see that in the earlier years, in the early 1960s, people could be executed for death for ritual murder. But of late, our courts, wherever they are not sure, they exercise caution. So it makes it very difficult for us as historians to judge the use of the death penalty harshly because of the different modes and changes that has taken. We see the different changes. However, what we need to address is our constitution, to see how we can relatively take this information that we've gathered and apply it. What is it that constitutes an acceptable extenuating circumstance? So that's my question to you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you to all of the speakers. I'd just like to invite us all to give them one more round of applause for such brilliant speakers. So we have come to the end, the very close to the end of our debate today. But before that, we have one last video we're going to show you, straight after which we are going to get the vote of thanks from Mr. Kasale. So please, I invite you to just watch this last video before we wrap up. Thank you.
So far in Botswana, the death penalty is only reserved for murder. I hear you mentioning rape a lot. Do you feel that rape, death penalty should be a sentence for rape?
Yes, I do. For serial rapists, I think it should be. I might even say, let me play it safe. Yeah, for serial rapists, I think it should be. I think it should be. I think you get put in jail and there are people there too, so you'll rape there too.
The first place is on the level gore ga go tsile yang gore motho a bolae motho yo mongwe. Go tsile yang gore motho a la palwa ke go itshwara. But go na le batho ba leng gore bona tota ithelo o fila gore ba deserve that penalty because motho mongwe khona go bola motho go ra mola mo bonang a ba mo segele le di pisipiso bana gore this person was intended to kill another person. Those people go na batho ba leng gore o ka fila gore ba tshwanetse ke yone ka thule.
Good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, before I begin, I respectfully ask that we observe a moment of silence in memory of our late founders, Donald Lawrence Moore and Beata Kasale Kabango. Thank you. It is important to recognize and acknowledge the presence of the following senior government officials from Office of the President and Ministry for State President. The delegation is led by Chief of Staff, Mr. Lipimutwe Sibitela. Former President of Court of Appeal, Dr. Ian Kirby, former High Court Judge, Mr. John Mosojane, Deputy Chair, Law Society of Botswana, Mr. Mboki Chilisa. I apologize in advance for leaving out anyone. I would have loved to mention them. Time is not on my side. However, it is a true honor. Your presence is proof enough of your ongoing encouragement and support. Ladies and gentlemen, quite simply, my purpose here tonight is to say thank you. Say I'm grateful for your selfless work and commitment, and say I appreciate you all. You could believe that. Today marks a significant accomplishment. Ayn Rand said, throughout the centuries, there were men and women who took first steps down new roads, armed with nothing but their own vision. Perhaps The Voice was an example of this 30 years ago. On the 12th of February, 1993, when it was first published by its late founders, Donald Moore and Beata Kasale, may their souls continue to rest in peace. We sincerely appreciate all of our readers and advertisers who have been there with us over the years and helped us reach this milestone. 30 years, They have made a significant contribution.
I would like to take this opportune moment to extend my gratitude to the following for making this event possible. Obviously, before anything else, our panelists. I mean, don't they just deserve a round of applause? Advocate Dr. Sidney Pilane, thank you so much for accepting our invitation. Mrs. Margaret Mosojane, Attorney Tshiamo Rantao, Attorney Tshepiso, Tjedu, Lediretse, and the moderators. They've done a fantastic job. Thank you so much. And I'd also like to thank Nago Timepiece. They've made a little something for our keynote speaker and the panelists for tonight. Mr. Gabriel Mutibedi Ralebo Aleka Mosose. Nick, also Nick Bonte, also known as Nick Mumpili of Sinepe BW. It's a film and content production and photography company. Baretu, you know, The Voice prides itself with empowering the youth. When Sinepe BW came to knocking into our doors, Hawasu Molla, Voice of the People, I think some 2 years back, we didn't hesitate. We allowed. Oh, let me be honest with you. These young people have got these creative, out-of-world minds that have made us come here tonight and have this magnificent event. So I'd like to thank you, Nick, and if you are looking for a company that deals with film production and photography, that's your go-to plug. And then, yes, Grand Area for the venue. For this particular event, we honestly struggled to get sponsors, but we are hoping, since this is a first of many, they'll come on board. Distinguished guests, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to the following members of the Voice team for continuing to make this publication what it is today. I think it would be unfair if I don't make mention of them. I mean, that's why we are here, right? The editor-in-chief, Emma Motapati, and her staff of editors and journalists are to be commended for the pertinent content and that continues to distinguish us as a reliable, trustworthy media outlet in Botswana, for establishing and upholding strong and positive business ties with our advertisers. Credit goes, excuse me, credit goes to Gertrude Foyer and her team in the role of advertising and marketing manager. Thank you to our production manager, Oten Totologolo, and his graphic design team for the eye-catching layout and designs that are crisp, fresh, vibrant, and colorful. I mean, the paper does reach our readers early thanks to the efforts of our operations director, Mrs. Sadiki Tsupe, and the circulation and accounts team. For the innovative, fresh ideas that have helped us become the industry trendsetters we are today. Special Projects Director Titi Kasale and the team are to be commended as well. But if it was my way, all of these people who would have appeared on the front page of this week's edition of The Voice, honoring their contributions to ensuring that we publish a copy each week. I mean, that's if I had editorial control over what is published. They would be appearing on the front page of this week's edition. However, I can say with certainty that we are in good hands. 30 years, we are 30 years now and wishing 30 years more to come and many more of the 30 years to come. In my conclusion, we are looking forward to this exciting adventure, VOP live debates, which is why we have hope for the future. In light of this, I'd like to invite the Voice Operations Director, Sadiki Tsupe, and Timepiece Director Gabriel Mutibeti to the stage to give our panelists some goodies as a token of appreciation. Once again, I want to thank everyone for attending and making this event a success. Realeboga. Thank you. And then on that note, when they're making their way to the stage, Besu Honale,
I did see us. I didn't think I saw folks.
there are folks actually, and food. Yes. So what it's like it's our moderators actually, yeah, they will lead us to our dinner. So I think you can. You can come this side, and then I think I will call their names. Right. So I will start with a former president of the Court of Appeal, Dr. Ian Kirby. You can come to the stage for something, Yana. Thank you. Let me go. Diana. Please.
Very good. Thank
Yes.
you.
Yes.
Oh, and a bag of goodies.
And a bag of goodies as well. All right.
Thank you, boys. Thank you.
Most welcome. Most welcome.
Much appreciated.
Most welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right. I think I'd also like to call on stage Mrs. Margaret Mosojane. Okay. Thank you. Hello. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And then I would like to call up on stage Advocate Dr. Sidney Pilane. Thank you.
Thank you, Naf. More than anything else, I thank you for page 3 of the voice.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, sir. I think, and then Attorney Tshiamo Rantao on stage. Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
But I won't comment on page 3.
All right. What can you comment on, though? And then lastly, Attorney Tshepiso Tjedu Lediretse. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, yeah. And then, yeah, thank you so much. I think there's some lovely goodies for the speakers as well that the team will give. So, Barejo, I think I'm done. Thank you so much for coming. And like I said, but thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
Okay, there is food just outside by the door. If you don't mind, please just allowing our invited speakers to walk in, to walk out first and serve themselves with. Right, yes. So perhaps if
Voice is available every Friday. Subscribe now. The Voice.